So, Your Majesty, we're in New York. And so I'm going to open our very special conversation with my prized possession, a first edition of your father's memoir, and read a passage to you in honor of the fact that we are in New York. The setting is 60 years ago, when then a 24-year-old King Hussein flies to New York. Well, he's already had 7 years on the throne, mind you. Flies to New York to attend his first meetings at the United Nations. And he has this to say: "It's a good feeling to be in New York. It's my favorite city in the world." The New Yorker, he writes, is a very special person, compounded of so many races, so vitally proud of his great city. But what fascinated me most was the friendly curiosity behind the New Yorker's unceremonious greeting to me: "Hiya, King." So, Your Majesty, hiya, King.
How are you?
Congratulations.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. I'm truly delighted to be here, and it's an honor for me to see actually so many old friends in this room, and I hope that I continue to live up to a lot of faith that was put in to me by many of the people in this room 20 years ago. I'm honored and I'm deeply touched to be part of this evening.
Thank you. So, Your Majesty, we met in Amman 20 years ago, just after you ascended the throne. So let me begin by noting we're both a bit grayer. Other than that, how have you changed over these 20 years? What lessons about leadership, about government, do you think you've acquired through on-the-job training?
Well, I hope a bit of wisdom over the past 20 years, but there's, I stopped 3 or 4 years ago saying it can't get any worse, unfortunately, but I think the consistency that I learned from my father is we're both sort of glass half full kind of guys, and with all the challenges that we have in our part of the world, you always have to look to the positive. You always have to reach out and do the right thing. And I think there's no time more pressing than today. The old adage that for evil to succeed is for good men and women to do nothing. So as challenging and as confusing as our part of the world looks, I am optimistic. We will move to the future. And I get that inspiration not only from my family, but from young men and women in Jordan that have that aspiration to make life better. And Jordan is just a small part of the Middle East that I think youth want to move forward, live together, and make a better world for themselves. And that's what gives us, I think, the energy to continue.
So we rarely hear an optimistic note, and so I'm delighted that you would say that. Look, the video that we showed a moment ago opened with the rise of ISIS, what you in the Middle East call Daesh, an Arabic acronym. We've just had a major milestone, the death of the founder of ISIS, following the destruction of the territorial caliphate, the semi-state, not real state, but the semi-state. But the problem of what ISIS is and what it represents certainly hasn't disappeared. How would you describe the challenge of radicalism and extremism in this era today, to Jordan specifically and more generally?
Well, I have exchanges with different organizations around the world, and we have something called the Aqaba process, where we've worked together to bring different countries together to be able to deal with this long-term challenge. We've created the Boko Haram Task Force, Shabab, the Balkans, counter-radicalization for Europe, the Asian one. We've had a lot of success in the past year, a lot of us coming together to do Aqaba Tech between intelligence agencies and tech companies, because I think this is the long-term challenge that we have. And in the past couple of meetings, I think, to be very brutally honest, when I talk to my audiences, I say, you still don't know who the enemy is. And that's extremely frustrating. The intelligence services do, the military do, but to realize that the challenge that we have is a global challenge. So ISIS has been defeated maybe in Syria and Iraq, people can say, but it's not been destroyed. And actually in the past couple of months, we've seen a emergence of them close to our borders and in Western Iraq. But it is a global issue. So why does a country like Bulgaria send 0 foreign fighters to Syria and Iraq? And if you understand the extremism in our religion, but Tobago, a small island in your backyard, sent 175. Until politicians understand who the enemy is, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. This is a generation issue, but it's, I think, frustrating that you know what the enemy is, but the majority of leaders in countries don't, or they don't want to know.
So, help this room understand.
Well, again, I want to be very careful because we're in a somewhat large audience, but
nobody will actually say a word.
I've been there before at that.
That's not true, by the way.
So the challenge that we have inside of a religion is those that believe, sort of the outlaws of what we call of Islam, Daesh, are those that believe that all of us, everyone in this room, are heretics, and unless we believe in what they say, they have the right to put us all to the sword. There is a battleground inside of Islam which is being fought not only by Muslims who understand their faith, but with other religions around the world, to be able to get rid of this scourge. So what we call the takfiri jihadist is going to be a challenge for all of us. You have them all over the world, and because of the internet and social media, we're going to have a problem wherever we are in the world in being able to deal with this. So unless we call the enemy and those that support them for what they are, it's going to take a long time for us to be able to deal with this. I'm being a bit diplomatic here. I mean, he's nodding at me saying I'm not saying as much as I should, but ask him after this meeting.
All right, let me ask you a different question, Your Majesty. 8 years ago, protests swept across the Arab world. Except perhaps for Tunisia, it didn't work out so great for many in the Middle East. Now, turn on a television, protests sweeping across the Middle East again. Algeria, Iraq, Lebanon, extending all the way to Iran. What's going on? Is this different than the last time?
Well, again, we've got to all remember that the Arab Spring, what the West calls Arab Spring, we call it the Arab Autumn in our part of the world, was led by youth that were extremely frustrated and wanted opportunities. I hope we look back at that point in history, and it is obviously a very defining road for us in Islamic and Arabic history. And I think we'll look back on it and say that was a crossroad that we needed to cross. And there are very many analogies, obviously, with Europe during the inter-Christian challenges that they had 400 or 500 years ago. And I think that's where the crossroads we are at today. This new set of issues that we're saying, you can't we have to compartmentalize it a bit, because certain countries it's because of frustration from the people because the leaders don't understand. The other countries is because it's regional politics being played by Arab and non-Arab actors.
So one thing one can say, looking at both waves, the monarchies seem to have avoided this. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Morocco. What's the secret recipe?
I think you should answer that. Monarchies, in the way I was brought up by His late Majesty, and he was brought up by his father and his father, is we're there for all of society. We are, fortunately or unfortunately, in many parts of the third world, tribally based. When you have a small monarchy like we have in Jordan and like you have in Morocco, we're the balancer for everybody in society. Whether you're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, whether you're tribal or you're a farmer, we are the ones that make sure that everybody's protected and everybody's supported. And I think that's what's helped the monarchies be stable during a very difficult time for our region.
Okay. Let's turn to the theme of your book, I mentioned earlier your father's book, the theme of your book, Our Last Best Chance, A Story of War and Peace, the major focus is on the Arab-Israeli peace process, which is regrettably dormant at the moment. So I want to ask you first about the peace process and then in a moment about your own peace with Israel. What is the formula for raising the peace process out of its dormancy? What role would you hope the United States would play toward that effort?
Well, anybody who's in the international community says that we can have peace between Israelis and Palestinians without the support of America doesn't know our region and the role that America plays. We all need America to bring both sides together. I think there's quite a few of us in this room that believe that the only way to move forward is a two-state solution, because the alternative is worse for all of us. Because then it becomes an Israel looking inwards, which none of us can afford. We then have an immediate challenge of equal rights, which again is something that we can't deal with. Unfortunately, we're in pause mode. As you well know, that Israelis have gone through a series of elections. We may be seeing another 3 months of elections that is not going to be good for anybody. So as a result, we're all in pause mode. And we haven't been able to get people back around the table talking to each other. The Jordanian-Israeli relationship is at an all-time low. Part of it is because of Israeli domestic issues. We are hoping that Israel will decide its future, whether it's in the next several weeks or in the next 3 months. And then it is very important for all of us, and I'm saying our friends here in the United States, to refocus our energies on bringing all of us back to the table and looking at the glass half full. If we continue this way, and even a pause of 3 months, whenever we're not talking to each other, stupidity reigns supreme, unfortunately, in our part of the world.
And are you hopeful that that the two-state solution, as you just described it, is not dead?
So I think for the first time in the 20 years that I've had to deal with this, and having watched my father go through this, that's a very, very important question. Have we gone beyond the point of no return? What is the alternative? And I think that good men and women can bring the momentum back in the right direction. But when I say in the book, the last best chance, is because every time we lose a year, it's going to be much more complicated and much more difficult for the Palestinian Israelis to go forward together. And Israel's future is being part of the Middle East. The problem with that is that's never going to happen 100% unless we solve the Palestinian problem. So there's a lot of people in our part of the world that could say behind closed doors, do whatever you want. But in reality, it is a sensitive, or it's an emotional issue that unless we can solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue, we'll never have the full integration that all of us deserve in our part of the world.
Your country's own peace with Israel. You said it's at an all-time low. Now, clearly from the implication of your remarks is that resuscitating the broader peace process would have a major impact on this. Is it the only factor?
The problems that we've had with Israel is bilateral. Part of it is internal politics, I understand that, but not at the expense of something that my father and the late Prime Minister Rabin fought so hard to achieve as a symbol of hope and opportunity for Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, and others. So when we are not able to talk about Red Dead, when we're not allowed to talk about trade, when we're not allowed to fix border issues, when the Israelis build an airport that is actually on our border and affecting our flight passengers, so they can't fly the airport, but they not allow us to build our own one in the Jordan Valley. This has been going on for 2 or 3 years. It makes no sense to me why the heroic situation that both Prime Minister Rabin and my father found themselves in. And again, we have to remind people that the Israeli-Jordanian peace was done without the Americans. It was Israelis and Jordanians sitting together because they had the confidence in each other to create this peace. 25 years from later, we're in this position where if they're looking down on us, I think they're very, very sad on how we've let everybody down. Now, I hope that whatever happens in Israel over the next 2 or 3 months, we can get back to talking to each other on simple issues that we haven't been able to talk about for the past 2 years.
And does the,
I appreciate the applause, but it's, we are all saddened that we are where we are today.
and I think it's fair to say that is what motivates the joy one saw in the pictures in Amman when at the ending of the agreement about the 2 parcels of land with the Israelis.
I think it's been the frustration of not moving the ball in the right direction that had such a reaction in Jordan when the land was handed over. And that's indicative of, I think, the frustration that we have that is going to be unhealthy for all of us. So again, we'll see what happens in the next couple of months. We've got to get that narrative moving back towards the light.
Your Majesty, I know that you have a plane to catch. So let me ask one sort of American-oriented question. It's not about this or that candidate. It's really about all of them. There is a confluence on both right and left calling on America to come home from the Middle East. We've seen this among many Democratic candidates. It was the language of our past Democratic president, and it's the language of our incumbent Republican president. So this isn't a partisan comment. What do you hear when you hear American leaders say, I want to get out of the Middle East? What message is that sending, and what message do you want to send back to Americans who say that?
So from an American perspective, or a British perspective, or a French perspective, or a German perspective, or other troops that are NATO-based and have been in our part of the world, absolutely justified to say that. Your young men and women have been in harm's way for many, many years. Many families have suffered the ultimate sacrifice. And so I am absolutely sympathetic with the desire for people to bring their troops back. The issue from a historic point of view and from our military background, unless you solve the problem, you're going to come back and have to revisit it at a tremendous cost to everybody. And so, again, the United States is in a unique position of being the most powerful, capable country in the world, and with that comes a moral responsibility to help stabilize the world. So from an ex-military point of view, and this is my personal opinion, sometimes when you move out of a campaign before it's over, you're only going to be back tomorrow to try and fix it again, having lost all that ground. So again, it's an American decision. Nobody can fault Americans for wanting their loved ones back. But they'll be back unless we solve it. And that's the problem. And again, I think what's changed over the past couple of years, I know from our country, we fought in both Syria and Iraq alongside all of you. We're back in Afghanistan. We were in northern Syria when our teams had to be pulled out recently. We're going to be committing again to North Africa. This is a global fight that we're all in this for the next decade. And I always said to myself that I hope that the military part of it is the short term. The long term is going to be changing people's minds. And part of that is, as I alluded to, the internet and how people are going to be recruited and understanding who the enemy is. So I know sometimes when we have these type of discussions, everybody's going to be leaving tonight feeling very depressed. And I don't want that to be what you remember this evening. Just know that there is a younger generation of people in our part of the world that just want to get on with their lives. Whether you're Israeli or Jordanian or Palestinian or Yemeni or Iranian, we want to be able to find jobs, we want to settle down with a family, we want to be able to move on. It's the politicians that make life miserable for everybody. So, me being one of them, by the way. So,
Present company excluded, Nita.
So what I'm saying is when you look at the glass half full, people just want to move on with their lives. And we forget that too often. If you ask Israelis and Palestinians, if we can bring you a peace, they're going to vote for that. And I think that's the problem sometimes with politicians is believe in your people because they do want to have the right thing, but give them that opportunity. And I'm not talking just about our part of the world in the Middle East. This is all over the place. So give the young people your love and your consideration because they will make the world better if we give them a chance.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking His Majesty King Abdullah II of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.